Hi, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Stephen Keeney, and I have a small channel here on YouTube where I make videos that pertain to boxing, kickboxing, and Muay Thai. So today we're going to be reading the Book of Five Rings by Miyamoto Musashi, as promised on the channel. And I'm going to read the book at a decent pace and also stop at certain points to talk about how the different teachings in it pertain to striking. Now, if you guys are grapplers or any other different art or martial art, a lot of the lessons are very applicable. So I just want to give you a basic way of understanding what it is Musashi's saying and how a lot of these general concepts of combat apply even to today's combat sports. So let's get into it. I'm going to start out with the introduction. Now, understand, this is Musashi himself writing these scrolls from a first-person perspective. Think of the chapters as books, and we're going to start with the intro and the Earth book, okay? I have been many years training in the way of strategy called Niten Ichi Ryu, and now I think I will explain it in writing for the first time. It is now during the first 10 days of the 10th month in the 20th year of Kane, 1645. I have climbed Mountain Iwato of Higo in Kyushu to pay homage to heaven, pray for Kwannon, and kneel before Buddha. I am a warrior of the Harima province, Shinmen Musashi no Kami Fujiwara no Genshin, age 60 years. From youth, my heart has been inclined toward the way of strategy. Now, when Musashi says strategy, he's speaking from the perspective of a swordsman, but he really just means fighting as it pertains to sword strategy. My first duel was when I was 13. I was struck down a strategist of the Shinto school, one Arima Kihei. When I was 16, I struck down an able strategist, Tadashima Akiyama. When I was 21, I went up to the capital, which is Kyoto, and met all manner of strategists, never once failing to win in many contests. After that, I went from province to province, dueling with strategists of various schools, and not once failed to win, even though I had as many as 60 encounters. This was between the age of 13 and 28 or 29. When I reached 30, I looked back on my past. The previous victories were not due to my having mastered strategy. Perhaps it was natural ability, or the order of heaven, or that other school strategy was inferior. And that kind of applies to today, right? The idea that, there are many different striking arts, but there's some that are objectively more effective because they're pressure tested in like freestyle competition. Even though every art has its strengths and weaknesses, there are some that are a little bit bang for your buck, right? After that, I studied morning and evening, searching for the principle, and came to realize the way of strategy when I was 50. Since then, I have lived without following any particular way. Thus, with the virtue of strategy, I practice many arts and abilities, all things with no teacher. To write this book, I did not use the law of Buddha or the teachings of Confucius, neither old war chronicles nor books on martial tactics. I take up my brush to explain the true spirit of this Ichi school as it is mirrored in the way of heaven in Kwannon. The time is the night of the 10th day of the 10th month at the hour of the tiger, which is 3 to 5 a.m. So this is old Musashi. He's going to write out scrolls and try to explain his theory of combat, okay? So he starts out, number one, the ground book. The ground book. There are various ways. There is the way of salvation by the law of Buddha, the way of Confucius governing, the way of learning, the way of healing as a doctor, as a poet, the teaching the way of waka, tea, archery, and many arts and skills. When he says the way of tea, for you guys that aren't familiar with Japanese culture, there's this thing they have called the tea ceremony, which is a very there's one way to do it, and you go through a series of steps, and that's the thing he's drawing parallels to. He's going to be drawing parallels to the way of doing things in a very concise manner, where you're very mindful of everything that you're doing. Each man practices as he feels inclined. It is said that the warriors in the twofold way of pen and sword, and he should have a taste for both ways. Even if a man has no natural ability, he can be a warrior by sticking assiduously to both divisions of the way. Generally speaking, the way of the warrior is resolute acceptance of death, although not only warriors but priests, women, peasants, and lowlier folk have been known to die readily in the cause of duty or out of shame. This is a different thing. The warrior is different in that studying the way of strategy is based on overcoming men. Through victory gained in crossing swords with individuals or in joining battle with large numbers, we can attain power and fame for ourselves or for our Lord. This is the virtue of strategy. I just want to talk about that for a minute because, we know that combat sports or fighting in war is very dangerous, but there's a lot of people that work very dangerous jobs where they actually feel there's a sense of duty or a sense of glory in doing it. You could think of linemen electricians that get killed by, very high AC voltage, people that fall off ladders that are just roofers trying to feed for their family. What Musashi's saying is that not only the warrior is someone that's willing to die for the cause of whatever it is they do with their life. The way of strategy. In China and Japan, practitioners of the way have been known as masters of strategy. Warriors must all learn this way. Recently, there have been people getting on in the world as strategists, but they are usually just sword fencers. The attendants of the Kashima Kantori shrines of the province Hitachi received instruction from the gods and made schools based on these teachings. Traveling from country to country instructing men, this is the recent meaning of strategy. Kind of reminds you of ineffective martial arts that spread like wildfire, right? Like some of the less effective karate styles in the 80s. In olden times, strategy was listed among the 10 abilities and 7 arts as a beneficial practice. So I guess he's talking about something that was almost like an article of back then. It was certainly an art, but as beneficial practice, it was not limited to sword fencing. The true value of sword fencing cannot be seen within the confines of sword fencing technique. And we find that martial arts are the same way, right? Like there's so many virtues of martial arts, even if you never get into combat sports fighting. If we look at the world, we see arts for sale. Men use equipment to sell their own selves, as if with the nut and the flower, the nut has become less than the flower. In the kind of way of strategy, that is this, both those teaching and those learning the way are concerned with coloring and showing off their technique, trying to hasten the bloom of the flower. They speak of this dojo and that dojo. They are looking for profit. Someone once said, immature strategy is the cause of grief. That was a true saying. And I mean, it's crazy how he's talking about something from back then that can easily be applied to today. We think of all this bullshit Instagram posts about how to box and all these different martial arts that are ineffective because, as martial arts become more mainstream, you get that kind of a thing. The 4 ways. There are 4 ways in which men pass through life: as gentlemen, farmers, artisans, and merchants. The way of the farmer, using agricultural instruments, he sees springs through the autumns with an eye on the changes of the season. Second is the way of the merchant. The winemaker obtains his ingredients and puts them to use to make his living. The way of the merchant is always to live by taking profit. This is the way of the merchant. Thirdly, the gentleman warrior, carrying the weaponry of his way. The way of the warrior is to master the virtue of his weapons. If a gentleman dislikes strategy, he will not appreciate the benefits of weaponry. So must he have a little taste for this? Fourthly, the way of the artisan. The way of the carpenter is to become proficient in the use of his tools, first lay his plans with a true measure, and then perform his work according to plan. Thus he passes through life this way. These are the 4 ways of the gentleman, the farmer, the artisan, and the merchant. Pretty literal, we'll keep going. Comparing the way of the carpenter to strategy. And remember, when he says strategy, he means like his way of sword fighting and being a warrior, not necessarily just the swordsmanship, but like the way of life you live as a warrior. So he's saying comparing the way of the carpenter to the way of the warrior. The comparison with carpentry is through the connection with houses. Houses of the nobility, houses of warriors, the four houses, ruin of houses, thriving of houses, the style of the house, the tradition of the house, and the name of the house. And it's sort of a double meaning because he means literally a house, but he's also saying the house as in like the house that you belong to. The carpenter uses a master plan of the building, and the way of strategy is similar in that there is a plan of campaign. If you want to learn the craft of war, ponder over this book. The teacher is a needle, the discipline is a thread. You must practice constantly. And we're going to see this come up a few times in the book where he says you must practice constantly, or other versions say you must further investigate this. Like the former carpenter, the commander must know normal rules and the rules of the country and the rules of houses. This is the way of the foreman. The foreman carpenter must know the architectural theory of towers and temples and the plans of palaces, and must employ men to rise up houses. The way the foreman carpenter is the same as the way of the commander of a warrior house. In the construction of houses, choice of woods is made. Straight, unknotted timber of good appearance is used for the revealed pillars. Straight timber with small defects is used for the inner pillars. Timber of the finest appearance, even if a little weak, is used for the thresholds, lintels, doors, and sliding doors, and so on. Good strong timber, though it be gnarled and knotted, can always be used discreetly in construction. Timber which is weak and knotted throughout should be used as scaffolding and later for firewood. The foreman carpenter allots his men to work accordingly for their ability. Floor layers, makers of sliding doors, thresholds and lintels, ceilings, and so on. Those of lesser ability lay the floor joists, carve wedges, and do such miscellaneous work. If the foreman knows and deploys his men well, the finished work will be good. The foreman should take into account the ability and limitations of his men, circulating among them and asking nothing unreasonable of them. He should know their moral and spirit and encourage them when necessary. This is the same as the principle of strategy. And I kind of just want to jump in there and say that what he's saying about the carpenter allocating his men for what they're good for is very similar to you and the way you manage the people around you that help you with your martial arts. You're going to have different coaches that have different purposes that you know what they're good for and maybe less effective for. You're going to have training partners. You're going to know which guys are going to spar light with you, spar hard with you, maybe get a good lifting session in with you, which will run with you, which guys are above your level that you can learn from, and which guys that maybe are below you, but you can utilize certain aspects of training. Like me personally, when I train or spar people that are lower than my level, it gives me a chance to work on my weak side with my boxing with them. So it's very comparable to how Musashi is talking about, this guy's good for laying floors. This guy's a lot better at maybe framing, and he's much more of an asset. But this other guy that's less of an asset can be used for miscellaneous work to not have to take away from the floor layers workload. Okay, so let's continue. The way of strategy. Like a trooper, the carpenter sharpens his own tools. He carries his equipment in his toolbox and works under the direction of his foreman. He makes columns and girders with an axe, shapes floorboards and shelves with a plane, cuts fine open work and carvings accurately, giving as excellent a finish as his skill allows. This is the craft of the carpenters. When the carpenter grows to be skilled and understands measures, he can then later become a foreman. The carpenter's attainment is having tools which will cut well, to make small shrines, writing shelves, tables, paper lanterns, chopping boards, and pot lids. These are the specialities of the carpenter. Things are similar for the trooper. You ought to think about this deeply. Kind of makes a lot of sense because you think about special forces like a Navy SEAL. I mean, these guys have a lot of equipment they need to manage and pretty much have everything in order and really know about the equipment that they're working with. So a lot of times, I don't think that a guy on a job for, let's say, building a house is maybe looking at this like a matter of life and death, But for a swordsman back then, you need to, or warrior class, whatever class it is, archer, swordsman, spearman, your equipment needs to be checked daily, managed, replaced, right? Like, because we're talking about life and death. The carpenter's attainment is having tools which will cut to make small. Oh, I already got that. Sorry. The attainment of the carpenter is that his work is not warped, that the joints are not misaligned, and that the work is truly planned so that it meets well and is not merely finished in sections. This is essential. If you want to learn this way, deeply consider the things written in this book, one at a time. You must do sufficient research. Outline of the 5 books of this book of strategy. The way is shown in these 5 books concerning different aspects. These are ground, water, fire, wind, which is also considered tradition and the concept of tradition, and void, or the concept of emptiness. The body of the way of strategy from the viewpoint of my Ichi school is explained in the ground book. It is difficult to realize the true way just through sword fencing. Know the smallest things and the biggest things, the shallowest of things and the deepest things, as if it were a straight road map out on the ground. The first book is called the ground book. So he's basically going to give you a synopsis of what each book is going to have to come. Second is the water book. With water as the basis, the spirit becomes like water. Water adopts the shape and its receptacle. It is sometimes a trickle and sometimes a wild sea. Water has a clear blue color. By the clarity, things of Ichi school are shown in this book. If you master the principles of sword fencing, when you freely beat one man, you beat any man in the world. The spirit of defeating a man is the same for 10 million men. The strategist makes small things into big things, like building a great Buddha from 1-foot model. I cannot write in detail how this is done. The principle of strategy is having one thing to know 10,000 things. And what he means by that is, I've applied this to my life where whenever I have learned how to self-teach myself things, I know that whenever I get into something new, even if I don't know it yet, I know what approach I need to take it. So that's what he means by learn one thing to learn 1,000 things. When you learn how to learn yourself, you know that even if you have a master teaching you, you're able to sort of approach things in a strategic way, how to get ahead, because you've done it once before. You can do it again in different categories. Third is the fire book. This book is about fighting. The spirit of fire is fierce, whether the fire be big or small, or so it be with battles. The way of battles is the same for man-to-man fights and for 10,000 a-side battles. You must appreciate that spirit can become big or small. What is big is easy to perceive. What is small is difficult to perceive. In short, it is difficult for large numbers of men to change position, so their movements can be easily predicted. An individual can easily change his mind, so his movements are difficult to predict. You must appreciate this. The essence of this book is that you must train day and night in order to make quick decisions. In strategy, it is necessary to treat training as part of normal life with your spirit unchanging. Thus, combat in battle is described in the fire book. Fourthly, the wind book. This book is not concerned with my Ichi school, but with other schools of strategy. By wind, I mean old traditions, present-day traditions, and family traditions of strategy. Thus, I clearly explain the strategies of the world. This is tradition. It is difficult to know yourself if you do not know others. To all ways, there are sidetracks. If you study a way daily and your spirit diverges, you may think that you are obeying a good way, but objectively, it is not a true way. So he's saying, don't get off your path. Don't get concerned with too many different things that takes you off your main focus. In martial arts, it could be the idea of you having a main style. You get into too many different things and you kind of lose the plot, and now you're not good at your main style anymore. If you are following the true way and diverge a little, This will later become a large divergence. You must realize this. Other strategies have come to be thought of as mere sword fencing, and it is not unreasonable that this should be so. The benefit of my strategy, although it includes sword fencing, lies in a separate principle. I have explained what is commonly meant by the strategy in other schools in the tradition Wind Book. Fifthly, the Book of Void. By void, I mean that which has no beginning and no end. Attaining this principle means not attaining the principle. The way of strategy is that the way of nature. When you appreciate the power of nature, knowing the rhythm of any situation, you will be able to hit the enemy naturally and strike naturally. All this is the way of the void. I intend to show how to follow the true way according to nature in the Book of the Void. And when he says the void, the emptiness, it's very comparable to when a fighter gets in a flow state where you have all your counters pre-trained thousands of times. You can do them without thinking. So when he speaks of the void, he's basically talking about being in a flow state. Niten Ichi Ryu, one school, two swords. Warriors, both commoners and troopers, carry two swords at their belt. So he's talking literally about Japan in the time that he lived. In olden times, these were called the long sword and the sword. Nowadays, they are known as the sword and the companion sword. Let it suffice to say that in our land, whatever the reason, a warrior carries two swords at a time at his belt. It is the way of the warrior. Niten Ichi Ryu shows the advantages of using both swords. Now, just for quick context, back in the day in Japan, when they were sort of changing their ways and laws, you couldn't carry swords openly unless you were part of a samurai class. But there was this loophole where you could carry a short sword indoors and in places, kind of like our Second Amendment with the carrying of smaller guns, but you couldn't walk around with like an AR-15 rifle out in the middle of a shop, right? So what he's saying is that the samurais and these warrior class people would actually be carrying both of those swords at the same time. The spear and the halberd are weapons which are carried out of doors. Students of the Ichi school way of strategy should train from the start with the sword and the longsword in either hand. So he's saying no matter the purpose, hold both of these swords in each hand, not choosing one or the other at any given time. This is the truth. When you sacrifice your life, you must make fullest of your weaponry. It is false to not do so and die with a weapon yet undrawn. So you can kind of compare that to striking, right? You ever see where there's like a certain fighter that has a good attribute, their leg kicks, their boxing combinations, and round one starts and minutes go by with them not using what they're good at and they get knocked out and they're submitted, whatever it may be. And it's like, you lost the fight before you like showing your hand, right? Like sometimes it's good to withhold information, but he's trying to say it makes no sense to be killed without using what you have. And the same could be said in striking. Don't go out there, move around, move behind the jab, get knocked out because you never use the good things that you have. The truth is, whether it's 2-minute rounds, 3-minute rounds, whatever combat sport, you should within the first minute be trying to employ some kind of an offense on your opponent. If you hold a sword with both hands, it is difficult to wield it freely to the left and to the right. So my method is to carry the sword one in each hand. This does not apply to large weapons such as the spear or the halberd, but swords and companion swords can be carried in one hand. It is encumbering to hold a sword in both hands when you are on horseback, when running on uneven roads, on swampy grounds, muddy rice fields, stony ground, or in a crowd of people. To hold the long sword in both hands is not the true way. For if you carry a bow or a spear or other arms in your left hand, you have only one hand free for the longsword. However, when it is difficult to cut an enemy down with one hand, you must use both hands. So he's saying you don't have to think so rigid. It's like, there's not one way that's the true way. You don't have to have two hands on the sword, but there is times where you may need to. It's kind of comparable in martial arts when some people think their way is the only way, when not considering that it's okay to, let's say, throw hard Muay Thai style kicks, but also throw snappy karate kicks. There's a time and place for both. It is not difficult to wield a sword in one hand. The way to learn this is to train with 2 long swords, one in each hand. It will seem difficult at first, but everything is difficult at first. Bows are difficult to draw, halberds are difficult to wield. As you become accustomed to the bow, so does your pull will become stronger. When you become used to wielding the long sword, you will gain the power of the way and wield the sword well. To me, this is directly applicable to 16-ounce gloves with sparring. Nobody trains in 16-ounce gloves. They put them on and they get tired in sparring. You shadow box with dumbbells, you train in 16-ounce gloves. Like he's saying with wielding the long sword in one hand, you will get used to it. Think of your 16-ounce gloves or your dumbbells as wielding the long sword. According to this Ichi school, you can win with a long weapon, and yet you can also win with a short weapon. In short, the way of the Ichi school is the spirit of winning, whatever the weapon and whatever its size. Don't have preferences to range. Fight from mid-range, fight from long range, fight inside the pocket. Get good at everything, even if you know you're better or worse at one or the other. It is better to use 2 swords rather than 1 when you are fighting a crowd, and especially if you want to take a prisoner. These things cannot be explained in detail. From one thing, know 10,000 things. When you attain the way of strategy, there will not be one thing you cannot see. You must study this hard. The virtue of the longsword. Masters of the longsword are called strategists. As for the other military arts, those who master the bow are considered to be archers. Those who master the spear are called spearmen, and those who master the gun are called marksmen. Those who master the halberd are called halberdiers. And the halberd is like that big pike axe thing. If you guys ever played Dynasty Warriors, that's like what Lu Bu uses. You can look that up, Dynasty Warriors, Lu Bu, or just type in halberd. But we do not call masters of the way of the long sword long swordsmen, nor do we speak of companion swordsmen, because bows, guns, spears, and halberds are all warriors' equipment. They are certainly not part of strategy. To master the virtue of the longsword is to govern the world and oneself. Thus, the longsword is the basis of strategy. The principle is strategy by means of the longsword. If he attains the virtue of the longsword, 1 man can beat 10 men. Just as 1 man can beat 10, so 100 men can beat 1,000, and 1,000 men can beat 10,000. In my strategy, 1 man can be considered the same as 10,000. So this strategy is the complete of a warrior's craft. And you could think about that as the idea of someone that, let's say, knows Taekwondo skills and is a great kicker, but doesn't really know how to fight. Someone that's a great boxer, but doesn't really know how to fight. He's basically saying that even if you yourself don't train in every area, you don't use every weapon, so to speak, you should have a vast knowledge of everything. And he's using the comparison that in his time, a bowman or a spearman, while they use a different weapon than the swordsman, or as he's putting it, the strategist would be someone that has a very deep knowledge of all areas of combat, even though they use the sword, which is, he's saying the spearman doesn't necessarily do that. The bowman doesn't necessarily do that. So he's saying that his way is not just about learning the sword skills, but it's about learning a deep variety of knowledge so that you yourself have a vast utility of skills. Very comparable to today. You can be someone that maybe is a kickboxer, that your hands are your best weapon, like myself, but you have a deep understanding of all areas of kickboxing, so nothing surprises you. The way of the warrior does not include other ways such as Confucianism, Buddhism, certain traditions, artistic accomplishments, and dancing. But even though these are not part of the way, if you know the way broadly, you will see it in everything. Men must polish their particular way. It's like I said before, if you kind of learn a way deeply, whatever it is in your life, whether you come from a music background, a electrical construction background, a art background, if you can apply the teachings of how you learned something at the time when you did and draw those parallels, you can start to learn anything else because you've seen the way broadly once before, or I should say, you've seen it directly once before. So now you can step back, see it broadly, and apply what did you do the last time to the next time you do it. That's what he's trying to say here. The way of the warrior does not include other ways, such, oh, I'm sorry. The benefit of weapons and strategy. There is a time and place for use of weapons. The best use of the companion sword is in a confined space or when you are engaged closely with an opponent. The long sword can be used effectively in all situations. The halberd is inferior to the spear on the battlefield. With the spear, you can take the initiative. The halberd is defensive. In the hands of one or two men of equal ability, the spear gives a little extra strength. Spear and halberd both have their uses, but neither is very beneficial in confined spaces. They cannot be used for taking a prisoner. They are essentially weapons for the battlefield. Anyway, if you learn indoor techniques, you will think narrowly and forget the true way. Thus, you must have difficulty in actual encounters. So once again, master all ranges. The bow is tactically strong at the commencement of battle, especially battles on a moor, as it is possible to shoot quickly from among the spearmen. However, it is unsatisfactory in sieges on castles or when the enemy is more than 4 yards away. For this reason, there are now few traditional schools of archery. There is little use today for this kind of skill. Today, meaning his time, I guess that art was already a bit outdated. From inside fortifications, the gun has no equal among weapons. It is the supreme weapon on the field before the ranks clash. But once swords are crossed, the gun becomes useless. One of the virtues of the bow is that you can see the arrows in flight, mid-flight, and correct your aim accordingly. Whereas gunshots cannot be seen. You must appreciate the importance of this. So just to jump in, this really reminds me of the idea of someone being like such a master of what they do in a certain art, whether it's taekwondo, karate, boxing, but just, that one element can just be defeated by approaching it in a different way. If they're not in the range that they like, they're not going to be as effective. So if you just take that range away or you smother that range, you can take someone's entire art and just throw it in the garbage because of one adjustment that you made. So like he's saying here, the gun is like undefeated, right? But it's true. If you had like 50 gunmen and they got swarmed by guys with swords in close quarters, it's like the effectiveness of the gun just all of a sudden goes out the fucking window because you have all these guys with swords just killing you, and they weren't meant originally for close quarter combat. Of course, today you have different types of guns, barrel length, stuff like that. But back then, he's talking about like a traditional, musket kind of thing versus swordsman. Just as a horse must have endurance and no defects, so it is with weapons. Horses should walk strongly, and swords and companion swords should cut strongly. Spears and halberds must stand up to heavy use. Bows and guns must be sturdy. Weapons should be hardy rather than decorative. You should not have a favorite weapon. To become over familiar with one weapon is as much as a fault as knowing it sufficiently well. You should not copy others, but use weapons which you can handle properly. It is bad for commanders and troopers to have likes and dislikes. These are things you must learn thoroughly. It's very comparable, right, to when you have a guy that has a favorite signature move. Everybody picks up on that signature move, and it becomes less effective because everyone sees it coming. There's some people where you can watch them train for 5 minutes and know which move they always go to. They're just spamming low kicks, spamming left hooks. They love throwing overhand, that kind of thing. Timing and strategy. There is timing in everything. Timing and strategy cannot be mastered without a great deal of practice. Timing is important in dancing, in pipe or string music, for they are in rhythm only if timing is good. Timing and rhythm are also involved in the military arts, shooting bows and guns and riding horses. In all skills and abilities, there is timing. There is also timing in the void. There is timing in the whole life of a warrior, in his thriving and declining, in his harmony and discord. Similarly, there is the timing in the way of the merchant, and the rise and fall of capital. All things entail rising and falling timing. You must be able to discern this. In strategy, there are various timing considerations. From the outset, you must know the applicable timing and the inapplicable timing, and from among the large and the small things and the fast and the slow, timings find the relevant timing. First, seeing the distance timing and the background timing. I mean, like, we all know timing is so important directly in the martial arts, but I think the way he's also explaining it here is even in your life, there's a time and place for everything. Like, if there's something you're trying to attain, whether it's in life or martial arts, sometimes it's good to think like where you are in your life and what's most important. Like, if you have no money and you want to be a great martial artist, maybe you have to double down on work and overtime because you need to get yourself a better living situation. However, maybe there's other times where, you're young, you're getting older. Now it's time to train really hard before you start getting over the hill. So it's interesting how he makes a large emphasis on this concept of timing in small scale and in large scale. This is the main thing in strategy. It is especially important to know the background timing, otherwise your strategy will become uncertain. You win in battles with the timing and the void born of the timing of cunning by knowing the enemy's timing and thus using a timing which the enemy does not expect. Breaking rhythm, breaking patterns. All the 5 books are chiefly concerned with timing. You must train sufficiently to appreciate all of this. If you practice day and night in the above Ichi school strategy, your spirit will naturally broaden. In this manner, large-scale strategy and the strategy of hand-to-hand combat is propagated in the world. This is recorded for the first time in the 5 books of ground, water, fire, wind, and void. This is the way for men who want to learn my strategy. He's going to give you like 9 commandments, okay? So let's go through these. Do not think dishonestly. The way is in training. Become acquainted with every art. Know the ways of all professions. Distinguish between gain and loss in worldly matters. Develop intuitive judgment and understanding of everything. Perceive those which cannot be seen. Pay attention even to trifles. Do nothing which is of no use. So, I mean, these are pretty literal, but I'll be honest. The one I like is do nothing of no use because you only have so much time and you got to allocate your time properly when you're trying to get ahead as a martial artist, an athlete, or a fighter. And I also really like the one where he says, know the way of all professions, because I've noticed a thing where guys that tend to have a hobby that they're very into or a profession, it doesn't always take away from their fighting skills like people may think. It's almost ironic that a lot of the best fighters are very good at another thing because whether they've read this book or not, they're probably doing some of the things that he's saying, applying those skills and seeing the parallels in everything they do. It is important to start by setting these broad principles in your heart and train in the way of strategy. If you do not look at things on a large scale, it will be difficult for you to master strategy. If you learn and attain this strategy, you will never lose even to 20 or 30 enemies. More than anything, to start with, you must set your heart on strategy and earnestly stick to this way. You will come to be able to actually beat men in fights and win with your eyes. Although by training, you will be able to control your own body freely, conquer men with your body, and with sufficient training, you will be able to beat 10 men with your spirit. When you have reached this point, will it not mean that you are invincible? Invincible is a big word to use, but I get what he's saying. Moreover, in large-scale strategy, the superior man will manage many subordinates dexterously, bear himself correctly, govern the country, and foster the people, thus preserving the ruler's discipline. If there is a way involving the spirit of not being defeated to help oneself and gain honor, it is the way of strategy. And that's the end of the ground